Honestly, at first, when I started dating, quite a few family members were like, "What are you doing?" First of all, he's not Hispanic. Second of all, he's not going to understand our culture. Third of all, he has children and an ex-wife. Like, what are you thinking? And I wasn't thinking because I was just going with my heart and lust. I'm going to be straight up. And at this time, I smoked a lot of marijuana.
What you've just heard is a clip from an interview that you'll hear today. It is from a conversation with our special guest who is joining me in a few moments. I'll introduce her to you, but I just wanted you to get a taste of what is to come. And I've entitled this episode as She Wanted Someone to Rescue Her. And this is episode 55, so stay tuned as we get the show started.
Hello and welcome to the Happier Marriage Podcast, a podcast for spouses longing to have a happier marriage so they can feel more connected, desired and supported. Now, to start the show, here is your host and Sherpa, licensed marriage and family therapist and certified relationship coach, Kingsley Grant.
Just a reminder, the Happier Marriage Podcast is on a mission to eradicate unhappiness from marriages globally, and you're encouraged to join this movement by sharing this podcast with at least one other spouse. Would you do that? I think you will. And just to be clear, this podcast is focused on helping Christian couples who are longing for a deeper connection, a stronger sense of intimacy, and better communication to transform their relationship. But I can guarantee, if you're not a person of faith, you'll find something that will be said that will be helpful to you. I promise you that as well. Now, let me say this. You may or may not agree with all that you'll hear, and quite frankly, you might be triggered by some of what you'll hear on this episode. But remember, that is one of the purpose of this show, is to stir things up, right? And then take you in for what I call a solid landing. And you can always share your thoughts through a comment or an email that you'll hear the announcer will make at the end of this episode. This show is brought to you by KingsleyGrant.com. And our hope is that you'll be challenged, inspired, and encouraged. And you can find resources at KingsleyGrant.com that may be helpful to you. Stay tuned as we get the show rolling.
So, the big question is this. How is it possible that you have a happier marriage when you feel like you've tried everything? Your spouse isn't making an effort. You're exhausted. You feel like giving up. Or there's so much hurt that's taken place between you and your spouse. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers.
Now, I stated earlier, we have a guest on the show, and her name is Diana Rice. You'll be hearing her share her story of, as she labeled it, one of dysfunction, and how her desire was to have someone become her white knight in shining armor. Well, you'll hear that phrase and why I use that phrase to describe what it is she was talking about. And Diana was very candid as she shared her struggles, which I'll let her tell you herself. So I won't be a spoiler. You'll have to hear her tell that story. Now, just to remind you that you can also watch the video version of this interview on my YouTube channel, Kingsley Grant, and make sure you subscribe to the channel when you go there, and you will be able to see this conversation in video format on the channel on YouTube. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Diana, and then I'll have her join me in this episode. Now, Diana is a licensed mental health counselor. She is a multi-talented professional with a unique skill set that can be applied in many different roles. She is highly creative and an innovative leader. Her desire to tell stories and positively impact the soul either behind or in front of the camera. Diana creates poetry and digital art as a hobby for therapeutic purposes. And she works primarily with teenagers at this point, and you'll hear as she tell a part of that in this interview. So without further ado, let's welcome Diana Rice to the show today. Thanks for joining me on the Happier Marriage Secrets podcast, where we are on a mission to eradicate unhappiness from Christian marriages. So glad to have you today on the podcast, Diana. How are you doing?
Hi, Kingsley. I'm excited. I'm nervous, a little anxious, happy. The roller coaster of emotions that the Lord has provided in each one of us. I'm feeling them all right now.
That's great. That's a great place to start because, that shows that you're depending on God to help you to even have this interview, and which is a great place to be, right? One of the ways, Diana, that we will accomplish, I believe, this mission that this podcast is aspiring is to have guests like you who will share your story and your expertise, right, to help our audience acquire skills or learn from what is shared, so that they can in the end have happier marriages. So before we talk about where you are today in your life, what was the story you had about marriage or marriages, and where did that story come from in early childhood?
Wow. So I come from a very dysfunctional, broken family. And my mom is an immigrant. My dad is as well. And he was in and out of our lives. He left when I was 5, and then he came back. And it wasn't a healthy, I did not have any healthy role models at all, because I lived with an aunt who was divorced. I lived with a grandma who, there was no men except for my first cousin, who I call my brother, and he was 6 years older than me, like, a boy, and then he went off to college. And so it was very, everywhere I saw, and especially in my cultural background, and I'm not saying all Hispanic men are bad at all, because I know quite a few good ones. It's just what I grew up with seeing was just very unhealthy, I would say probably intergenerational traumatic situations that people did not have high emotional quotient or the tools and resources to be able to deal with their own stuff. So they pass it along to the next generation, which I'm trying to learn a lot to stop it in my own walk. So
what were the kind of environment around you as far as marriages? So I'm hearing that you were not, your dad and mom were not together, right? So that what you described as dysfunctional. Were there any marriages you saw around you that kind of made you wanted to one day say, I want to have a marriage like that, or, man, I don't want to have a marriage like that? What was your experience in that regards?
Wow. So I did have an uncle, my Tio Gume, and he was a Marine military man. He's my dad's half brother. That's probably the closest that I saw with him and my Titi Carmen. And they have 5 children. And when he would come in and out, he was considered like the rich uncle, because he was the only one that like had everything straightened out of all the uncles and aunts that I knew. That was probably the closest that I ever saw. Other than that, honestly, I grew up on a very steady diet of television. And so that's where I got a lot of my information from, like watching Leave It to Beaver. And, the 3 channels that we had back in the 70s. Yes, I'm that old. And, and then I watched a lot of telenovelas and soap operas. So I gathered quite a few stories in my head, let alone with Walt Disney putting stories in my head of marriage and the knight in shining armor. So honestly, I don't ever had a super healthy understanding of what marriage is until I became a Christian.
So I'm hearing that you had the made for TV kind of marriages that you would watch, and of course it's all put there, and they're going to show you all the wonderful things. Or so, and of course at times some of them have, like, you see the dysfunction, you see and all the different things they describe. But that's where you got your information from. That's where your point of reference would be when it came to marriage, right? Because you never had that around you. did that put you at, how would you say then, as far as you, when you started getting to adulthood and possibly thinking about marriage, was there anything about that that kind of had a skewed view of what marriage should look like? Or how would you say your approach in that time would be as you thought about marriage at some point? Was there any kind of expectations or, lens to which you were looking at the time, or how would you describe that?
Well, I think growing up like with complex PTSD, that's what, um, it was more of me just wanting to be loved and accepted.
Mm-hmm. And for the audience, of course, PTSD is, of course, post-traumatic.
Post-traumatic stress disorder, but I'm talking about childhood or developmental trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not even in the DSM. And honestly, Kingsley, if that was in the DSM, that big fat book would turn into a pamphlet. But that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so as I started dating, and I think it's because I just had a lot of internal turmoil, and plus I had quite a few I hate to say spiritual abuse. I did grow up Catholic, and I'm not saying Catholicism is spiritual abuse. I'm saying that what I experienced, the whole guilt and shame, along with my grandma that I did live with, was a Santeria medium. So so I had a whole bunch of stuff. And then, of course, being raised in a low economic area, not understanding that, so I was highly hypervigilant constantly. So I just was looking for someone to save me.
Oh, interesting. Right?
Yeah. And I had this dream of just, I dated, honestly, I'm that typical girl with daddy issues, because I work with a lot of teenagers. So it's, ooh, those are the girls that will, Anyway, so I have a history of very poor decisions, drugs and alcohol. I had quite a few boyfriends and stuff like that before I met my husband. So honestly, that is what I was seeing and doing and feeling and just trying to stop the pain. And so, I mean, and when someone gives you attention and love bombs you, or you feel great. I mean, it's that honeymoon feeling. And I didn't know like that wasn't love, right? I confused sex and love. And when you confuse those things, especially as a teenager, it could become detrimental to your psyche. Some people call it soul ties. Other people call it, promiscuity, and other people just judge it and be like, oh, look at that. I don't want to say the bad words that a lot of young people are called, especially females. So anyway, I met my husband. I saw him.
So before you get to that point, I'm curious to see now, because you describe how coming into the place of your life, you really didn't have a framework or a lens or a model per se to follow. No. So I'm curious to see how did you know that you were ready for marriage, and what was the indicators for that for you? And so to make that decision,
I think to make that decision, I was just ready. I think because I started at a very young age partying and doing really like harmful things to myself, not knowing that they were harmful at the time. It was just this feel good, happy, like, woo, just didn't want to feel pain. So I just continue on that pattern of addiction and other things. I was tired. I was ready to settle down. I was a preschool teacher at the time. And so I loved children. I still do to this day. I have 5 grandchildren now, which I'm so grateful for. I think I was just ready. And so when I saw my husband, I just wanted to get away from my household I was living in. Honestly, I was actually living with a guy at the time. Remember, I wasn't a Christian, people, so don't judge me. And so I was living with someone at the time, and I remember seeing this hot construction guy back in the day doing construction work, and he actually called my sister up. I have a half sister with same dad, different mothers. And she said, hey, listen, so-and-so asked about you. And I gave him your number. And I'm like, wait, I have a boyfriend. But long story short, I ended up, he never called me. And so I called him because that's how bold I was, or I still am a little bold like that. So, yeah. And so I called my husband, Jim, who's my husband now. And he's this shy Southern country boy. I didn't, older than me. He's 13 years older than me. And he came over to my mom's house that night because I left where I was living to go back to my mom. My mom allowed me to come back, and I was 22 years old at the time. So anyway, yeah, I mean, and then from that point on, honestly, my husband and I kind of trauma bonded in a way. He's a Southern Baptist preacher's kid. So like literally we are so opposite. If you just see the two of us or just be around the two of us, you would be like, how are you two together still?
Is that where it's saying come from? Opposite attracts. You're the storybook, the dictionary,
Yes.
picture of that.
Yes. You would flip that page and see a picture of my husband in it.
So at that point, then coming into marriage, I'm sure because you're at the time you're saying your walk with even with God had not been really established that well. So was there any did you seek out any kind of mentorship, counseling, any kind of advice about what you're getting into, and possibly together or separately?
So yes. So I'm my husband's second wife. So he was married, has 3 kids with another woman at the time. I mean, not at that time. No. They were separated. I had nothing to do with any of that.
Yeah.
People assume that because I'm the younger woman, but I know they had their situation, and he was a single dude when I met him. Anyway, so we did go to premarital counseling. It was like basic questions of, what are you going to do about finances? Who's going to take care of the kids? Just like the basic, I hate to say sterile questions of they didn't get into deep stuff. It was just like, let's meet a couple of weeks. Here's the 5 questions. Okay, check. And then we were married listen, this is how much of a nature girl I am because I worship God through nature. All right. We got married on Earth Day, April 22nd, 1995 at Butterfly World. If you all know where Butterfly World is, outside. And so that's one thing that keeps us together is how much we love Jesus through his creation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So but at the time, though, at that early stage, the spirituality or Christianity was not necessarily the front and center at the time, or how did that come about for you?
So he was going to the church that he's been going to at the time where I was a preschool teacher at. So that's how we kind of saw each other. Like I was a preschool teacher. I looked over, he's doing the concrete work, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, this guy. And he sees me and he's like shocked, like a deer in headlights. And he just went through he's going through a hard divorce and all this stuff. And I got along with his kids pretty well because I knew him from being part of the church, the preschool. And so then that's when we started dating, and the kids and I got along great. I am my mom's only child. So I do have a half sister, but she's almost 8 years older than me. So I never grew up with siblings. Honestly, growing up, I was alone a lot in the streets because my mom was working 2 jobs. I mean, listen, I'm not blaming my mom for anything. Like she did the best she could with the knowledge she knows and the resources she had at the time. So I get it. And so, but at the same time, when you're 8 years old running the streets of New York, that's a little dangerous, and you're picking up stuff that a young elementary school person should never be picking up. So anyway, we would go to church. That was another thing. Like he was a Southern, I mean, he still is a Southern Baptist preacher's kids. We met at a church, and every Sunday we were at church, and I was listening, and I was teaching at a Christian preschool, even though at the time, listen, I was raised Catholic. I know who Jesus is. Oh, let me tell you, I know, because the nuns constantly told me when I was young that I put him on that cross. And I'm like, I don't know that bloody man up there. Like, why are you putting that on me? That's a whole different podcast. Anyway, but we would go to church and I would listen and I would try to learn. I've always, like, I am a lifelong learner, and so I was learning, and it was in those children, like, I am 22, 23, 24, 25 years old listening to the preschool sermons, like what they teach at preschool, or I'm teaching them. And that's where I started developing my understanding of the Bible. And I'm going, wait, what? Wait, huh? And then I had questions, because sometimes I would hear people say, like, well, you're married now, so you need to be submissive and submissive no matter what. And then I would question that, because honestly, I have a minor in women's studies, and I grew up with a bunch of strong women, and I saw a lot of abuse of women. So I always question that too. Like, wait, what? I go, so you're telling me that if my man is beating me, that I have no rights? Like, oh, I should be like, oh yes. And some women were like, yeah. And I'm going, and so I was always known as like the feisty, argumentative. I hate this. Like, ugh.
Yeah. So that kind of went against the grain of your kind of personality, but also your upbringing and so on. Because you saw strong women around you. You saw how they were go-getters, and especially your mom being a mom, raised you by herself. And so those are some of the things that kind of flowed in you. And so it became a challenge. I would imagine hearing that as well. But the challenge wasn't that only there, but you also describe how you have an interracial marriage. So you have a challenge now, of course, of that piece as well. And now, how did you navigate those challenges to the place where, you've been married now for 28 years, right? There's something that you must be doing right. You guys must be doing, right. And we talk about it a little bit more about in a few moments. But how did you navigate those challenges in that time? Having, of course, dealing with the submission piece and the strong woman piece and the cultural piece and the, interracial piece. I mean, how did you do that? What was it like?
So, it was a very emotional roller coaster ride. I think it was always asking questions to those that were around me, that were like either spiritual mentors or those I challenged them to their own thinking as well. Because honestly, I went to a church that it was where he had, roots already planted with his family and his first wife. And I went from a Catholic church, because I grew up Catholic. I was still going to Catholic church. And then I was like, okay, now I'm married. I want to do this right. I want to be, June Cleaver. Little did I know I am not June Cleaver. I'm, I am me. Like,
yeah.
So what the battle was, honestly, at first, when I started dating, quite a few family members were like, what are you doing? First of all, he's not Hispanic. Second of all, he's not going to understand our culture. Third of all, he has children and an ex-wife. Like, what are you thinking? And I wasn't thinking, because I was just going with my heart and lust. I'm going to be straight up. And at this time, I smoked a lot of marijuana, knowing that I had anxiety and, just trying to live this life, like one step at a time. And I realized when I first met his family, when he brought me to his family, my strong personality scared them. But it's not because I was coming from, it's the cultural thing. We're Latin. We're like, I'm Caribbean, like Caribbean people. We're passionate. We're loud. We speak loud with passion. And, all of a sudden his mother's like, he comes from the culture of, the country culture of bless your heart. I did not know bless your heart meant, it was a little degrading. I had no idea about that. Yeah. That whole trying to navigate that, like keeping my Latin culture, like, hey, no, this is who I am, and trying to disentangle what was trauma from childhood, what is my culture, right? What the Lord actually says, no matter what your skin is or where you come from, right? And understanding this other human being with a whole different personality than I and making it work. And so that was like, I'm still trying to do that, honestly.
So it sounded like this was some more personal growth on your part, because you had to then modify some of your thought process. You had to kind of acclimate and adjust. So it was on a lot of moving parts taking place, because you were in a relationship, and it sounded like you were determined to make this work. Obviously, 28 years later, and regardless of those kind of odds or those kind of challenges, you made it happen. Sometimes I find in relationship, Diana, where people see these and they will, as crutches, right? They will blame those and say, my relationship is not happening because of this. What would you say to a spouse or husband or wife who may find themselves in that situation, and they're, it's so challenging for them, and now they're looking at that as a reason why their marriage is not working? What would you say to that one, or maybe to the wife, or even to the husband, but to the wife in particular?
And we're talking to Christian women or anybody?
Just to a married couple, in a Christian setting, yeah.
Okay. So first and foremost, it is understanding the prayer, because this is a prayer that has gotten me through, that I learned, is Psalm 139, verses 23 and 24. Okay. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts.
I love that.
Anything in me that offends you, and lead me along the path of everlasting life. Because we have to search ourselves first. Because honestly, there's one thing that the pastor I have now saved our marriage. I was at a place years ago where I was in front of a divorce lawyer. Wow. So let me tell you, this has not been a perfect ride, and it will never be a perfect ride. Marriage is work. Every relationship is work. The first and foremost is your personal relationship with God. And if you don't have that in a healthy place, don't expect your other relationships to be healthy. And that's that takes work. It's not like easy peasy. Oh, I'm saved, prosperity. Let me get my money. Let me get my relationships. And if it doesn't feel good, I'm done. That's the mentality of our culture nowadays. There's no resiliency. There's no understanding and taking ownership of yourself first, and I understand there is abuse. I'm a therapist, Kingsley, it. We see some stuff that most humans should not be seeing. We are trained for this, and it's getting them to a place of, it's grieving. You have to grieve these moments that from the past, so then you learn from them and then grow from them. So what I would say to the woman or the man, whoever's listening to right now, it's where's your relationship with God when you're feeling these feels? God is never changing.
Yeah.
He is, his ways are not our ways either.
Yeah.
And sometimes in those valleys that I've been in, because honestly, my husband and I have been in therapy quite a few times. We have a lot against us. Statistics are against. I'm the second wife. We are, we've had so many different situations happen with our kids, and just stuff like that. And now we have the empty nest. And when the empty nest happened, I'm looking at this dude and going, "Who are you? What do you want? What are we doing here? Are we up, or are we going to go do work?" And he does the work too.
I love this psalm that you shared. I think that was such a very, very pertinent and pointed and very appropriate scripture, because I think that where the responsibility, people want to blame and point the finger, but I love what you've emphasized. Search me, oh God, and see what's in me, what's skewed, what's bent, what's out of line in me. Is like what Jesus would say, first see the speck in your brother's eye, but there's a plank in your eye. Take that out first. And I think that's where we are losing many of our relationships. We want to look for an excuse or who to blame and a cause, and then we don't take responsibility for our own journey, our own self. And one of the mission of eradicating unhappiness from marriage is pointing to a person and say, hey, you're responsible for your own happiness. You're responsible for your own happiness. You make a choice whether you want it or not. As hard as that may sound, I think it's you look across scripture, every time a person who comes out from the valley they had to take that journey themselves with God and come out on the other side and not look around. Peter tried it, but what about John? And Jesus said, hey, Peter, what about John? You follow me, you keep your eyes on me. Martha, what about Mary, my sister? Mary have chosen the better part. Responsibility. So I love that you said that, Diana. And that was so, I believe, such a powerful response to that question that I asked. And I think I couldn't have asked for a better answer. That was really, really powerful. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, it's also understanding, like, we want the other to change, to become the person to relieve our expectations, right? Like, I had a lot of pain from childhood. I am still processing that with my own therapist. I am still learning about it. I'm taking information, but I'm also trying to put it in action, because honestly, people will listen to this podcast and they're logical. They know. It is hard, though, to take the first step to the action because it's scary. It's like, what if the other spouse, like, you're having issues and they're not wanting to look within themselves and they're doing the blame, or they have I hate to label people because I don't like that. But at the same time, we are a therapist, so we're trained that way. It's just like, what if they are narcissistic, and they're not doing their own work? What do you do then? What do you do with all that? And that's a whole, like, I could tell you what worked for me, and it's still working for me for now. At the same time, it's understanding that your walk in your marriage is between you, your spouse, and the Lord. And you can't change no other human being. I wanted to change my husband so bad, and he wanted to change me.
Of course.
Okay. He thought, this is what he told people in the beginning. Well, in the first, and we went to marriage counseling. He's like, she was young. I thought she was just this wild horse I can tame. And honestly, they're looking at the psychologist going,
yeah, I just feel bad.
right?
Yeah.
So lately, the last time I went to therapy, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. This thing revolutionized our marriage so bad. The last time we actually went to therapy. I mean, no, we didn't even go to therapy. We went to a pastor, and he's like, I'm not a counselor. I'm a pastor, but I could try to give you biblical wisdom. He drew this triangle.
Yeah.
All right. And he said, this is basically what marriage. It was so simple, but at the same time, it made us crack up while we're in the middle of being angry at each other. Yeah. And that really convicted me. That triangle just convicted me. Like, wife, husband, and the closer you get to God, the closer you get to each other. And I bawled like a baby. And my husband, actually, who is not, if you know what the Myers-Briggs is, he's an ISTP. And you guys, ISTPs is just straight up left brain. He's the person you want on your side if there is a total emergency or the world's coming to, he's the one that
practical, just
stays. He is the opposite of me. Well, I shouldn't say that. I've learned a lot from him, but it's like, I'm the one who's like, oh, we got to care for that person, and the emotional.
Right.
I'm an NFJ, so we are totally on the opposite spectrum.
Yeah, which I think is really a good blend, because that's what makes it a very strong marriage, because you take a part of him, he takes a part of you, put those together, and that's where we are formed, right? So I become we, and that's a we part is formed. You reference Diana, which I think is a very important part of this conversation, is yes, our work as licensed therapists, and so we work with a lot of people over time, but your specialty, your expertise more is to teenagers, right? And that's where your heart is, of course, but you do a very fantastic job with teens. So in your experience, what are some of the challenges that parenting a teen can have on one's marriage?
Ooh, That's a whole, like, I think I'm just going to stop working with teens, honestly. I'm tired.
Yeah, it can
Uh,
be exhausting.
it is, it's a big challenge because a lot of teens that do come to me come from very unhealthy marriage um, families, very dysfunctional families or um, abusive couples or like I don't know how else to say, or the parents are ganging up on the teenager, or I don't even it's so wide. The range is so wide. So with the teenagers, I tried to get them to understand who they are in God, no matter what, no matter their background, no matter how much abuse they've gone through or neglect they've gone through, or neither. Like I have some teenagers that come with their parents are wonderful. I've had to deal with beautiful parents who just love their kid too much, where they're suffocating them, and it's teen angst. Like I had, to disentangle what teen angst is or what is big time neglect and abuse or things that have happened that the parents have no idea that has happened, because you can't be with your kids 24/7. You just can't, and if you try to, then you're a helicopter parent and you're suffocating them. And then that's not healthy either. So working with couples or single moms, I work with a lot of single parents or divorced, like the divorced. I have like a handful of young adults, teenagers, young adults who come from that, from a lot of, even when the parents are say, this is not your fault, the divorce is not your fault. Honestly, what I hear, they feel like they have no place anymore, and it is their fault. Or they just feel like, if I care for daddy's girlfriend, then I am not cheating on mom, but like
Loyal.
Like, or vice versa. Or if I like dad's girlfriend or mom's boyfriend or whatever it is, and I see a lot, it's just hard. It's hard to see a young person suffer. So I try my best to give them as many tools now. So then later on, when they are 30, 40, 50 in their own relationships, or realizing like, oh my goodness, things that happen in childhood are affecting me now. Because all our childhoods affect us. That is why it's really important to search why you do, or why you think, or why you feel.
And that's really, I think, so important, because I mean, we're shaped by those things. And I find that, as you know this very well, that stressors in marriages can really be exacerbated because of a teenager. And so it puts a lot of strain sometimes on marriages. And so if I was to ask you just to give us 2 or 3 things that parents of teens can do to make sure that their marriage remain intact, regardless of what's happening, that their marriage remain intact, what might be 2 or 3 either tactical things that they could do to make certain that becomes a priority and remains intact?
Go to every marriage seminar you can. I'm just thinking of things that helped me raise 4 teenagers. Our baby's 24. And honestly, I am very proud of all 4 of the kids, and none of them are perfect. Okay. But none of them are, like addicts or in jail or have made super poor choices due to what could have been a lot of situations, because I mean, they came from divorce. You know what I mean? And honestly, I'm so grateful that they have given me grace as their bonus mom, because I hate the word step. And their mom didn't demonize me, and I didn't demonize her. And that's me. So if you're in a split situation, it's like, try to get the peace for the teenager. But that's a whole different thing. You asked me about what to give parents.
Get 2 or 3 tactical things that you would say that would help them to keep the marriage intact.
Yeah, to keep the marriage intact is to make sure that the 2 of you are connecting at least on a weekly basis on just how to be better parents. Because if you don't do that, you think you know it all. Or the worst thing I hear constantly from parents, well, they had no idea. They have it good. Well, guess what? these teenagers, especially nowadays, are going through so many things. And if they're not going to feel safe at home with their parents, they're going to find a group of people that makes them feel safe, loved, and accepted. And guess what? I've worked with gang members. I have worked with drug addicts, like teen drug addicts that are like on pills, because that's the first group that accepted them at school. Or, et cetera, et cetera. And even in the church, so you as parents, your responsibility is to work your stuff through so you don't continue to put any kind of traumatic, unconscious situations onto them. And guess what? It's going to hurt to look in that mirror. It is. And it's okay. Because once you get through it, you become better. You grow, you become a better parent, and it's never too late. I know of a mother who is in her 50s, and she apologized to her 26-year-old son for all the stuff that happened when he was a child. And she's married.
Oh, yeah.
It's never too late to shift your perspective, to learn new skills, to ask for forgiveness, because that's what I see how Satan works, is to put that pride, that ego, that, no one did that for me. Why should I do that for them?
I think, Diana, I mean, that is such a profound response, because I think it's so true. I think you said so much in that one last response to that question, because I think as a person who's listening right now, as they sift through, and I want to recommend, pause and go back and rewind and listen to what Diana shared. If you have teenagers and you're actually struggling and wrestling and your marriage is under duress as a result of that, I think what stood out to me when Diana emphasized, make sure that your marriage, you're working on yourselves. Make sure that is healthy first, because it's like, the whole airplane thing. First, put the mask on yourself before you could put the mask on your child or anyone around you who's dependent on you. And this is the kind of thing you're describing. And Diana, we could probably go on and on and on, but I think we're coming to the end of our show today. But I really wanted to get this piece in. As we're kind of closing out, because of the focus of this show is to place one's happiness in marriage on that one person that you emphasized so well earlier. Is there some things that wife, especially, or their husband, but from a woman's standpoint, may do or could do to ensure that she is making herself, right, working on her own happiness? What might be some areas of focus, or one area of focus you may want to start with to ensure that?
Well, I think as wives and mothers, and if you're not a mother, I'm sorry, or not. I mean, not everybody's meant to be a mother. But as a wife, is to understand that you are more than just a wife. So understand who you see. I am Diana. I have fractured parts of me. Okay. I'm Diana, the therapist. I'm Diana, the wife. I'm Diana, the mother. I'm Diana, the friend. I'm Diana, the daughter. But I'm Diana. God made me, right? A whole being. So the number one thing I think any woman, married or not, is to really take the time to look within themselves and understand that inner child part that needs healing, and then invite God into those places and grieve and mourn and move on. Because as you realize, you will grow. That anxiety that you may have of not being good enough, well, you are good enough in the Lord. That anger you have for all the, like the victimization that some people have, it's like wherever your brain goes, your energy flows. And the Lord made us an energy being. And I mean, he made us, he put the breath in us. So use your 5 senses, all 5 of them, to stop yourself, learn how to respond in wisdom instead of react in emotion. Because I am a very emotional person, which I'm surprised, Kingsley, I didn't cry in that prayer we did right before, I swear, because I'm a crybaby. And but it's actually like asking to stop yourself, to train yourself. You are able to train your brain. I'm a cognitive behavioral therapist. I understand limbic or training. I understand neuroplasticity. I know the brain, right? And I studied that so much. And now I had to practice what I preach. Like, it's really easy for us therapists to help everybody else. And then we're sitting here a mess in our own office. But at the same time, I've done the work. I'm still doing the work. I'm still learning. And it's like, do the work. Listen, wives. And if your husband's not doing the work, that's on him. He's going to have to answer to the Lord. He has to answer, and you will too. So just use your 5 senses. Like, the next time you pick something up, to put it in your mouth, say, is this going to heal me or hurt me? The next time you watch something like a telenovela or a soap opera, is this going to heal me or hurt me? Whatever you listen to, if you have a group of friends that are sitting there, you don't need that, man. You don't need to put up with that. Like, is that healing you or hurting you? Where is their wisdom coming from? Is it coming from God, or is it from their own hurt, traumatic experiences? And so on and so on. Learn how to be still and know that He is God. Like, to be still. I'm not talking about just meditating and emptying out your mind. I'm talking about sitting there with breath work and memorizing verses because listen, the enemy wants to steal, kill, and destroy all your relationships, especially the one with yourself.
Period. I can't even add anything more.
Mic drop.
That's what it is. Mic drop moment. I'm telling you, let's put an altar call right now. And, no, that was so powerful. That's so, I think, I couldn't ask for a better rap than that. It was so powerful. And I think it's a God moment. It was very divine. And I appreciate you being sensitive to speak that way just now to that spouse, that husband, but also that wife mainly. I think it was very, very clear and a call to action, very practical thing. So I thank you for that. Tina, I'm thinking people are going to want to know more about you and where to find out about you and how to maybe contact you when they do having listened to you. Where is the best place that those who are listening might want to know more about you? Where would you send them?
My website. Actually, I'm working on changing it right now because I kind of created it myself, and it looks. So I hired someone. So hopefully it'll be up in the next, but it's up right now. It's through thevalleytherapy.com. Mm-hmm. So just like Psalm 23 verse 4, that's what it's from, through the valley. Okay. Listen, you guys, I've been through the valley, right? And I'm walking towards my mountaintop, but honestly, I know that I won't get to that mountaintop until Jesus calls me home.
Amen. So it's through the valley therapy.com. And we have the link, of course, in the description that follows this video. So I want to say thank you, Diana, and on behalf of the audience today, thank you so much for being. I have to have you back one day to both us kind of co-host a session one time, maybe a live broadcast. We can have you call in and ask questions and so on. So I would love to have that at some point. But I want to say thank you for your time and just your delivery and sharing so much of your vulnerability. I thank you for being that way because I think our audience would appreciate that. So on behalf of the Happier Marriage Secrets audience, and we're making sure marriages are making marriages happier again and eradicating unhappiness from marriages globally. Thank you for joining me in this mission today and depositing and make this possible. So with that said, I want have a fantastic rest of your day. And audience, again, make sure you connect with Diana and let her know how your thoughts about what you heard today. So Diana, thank you and God bless you. Okay.
You too. Jesus loves you, people.
Amen. And there you have it, my friends. I hope you got a lot from this episode. Make sure you follow Diana and share this episode with others. As you're seeing, the link, of course, will also be in the description that follows this episode. If you found value in this episode, make sure you leave a rating and a review to help the show get more visibility. And I really appreciate that. And if you haven't taken the Happier Marriage Quiz as yet, make sure you do. It's a good way to assess the state of your marriage and get some feedback. And if this interests you, you can access the quiz at happiermarriagesecrets.com, happiermarriagesecrets.com/quiz. And you can have access there. It's in 90 seconds or less, you'll be able to complete that test. That quiz, not test, that quiz. Okay. It'll give you a good feel of your marriage. You get a score, and then also a PDF you can download if you want to, but it will tell you about the state of your relationship and what the next step should be. So I want to say thank you for joining me today on this episode of the Happier Marriage Secrets podcast. And again, please leave a rating and a review. Tell one more person about this interview, this show, and maybe even send them the link so that they can listen in and get the value as you did today. And make sure that you tell Diana thanks. If you're on any social media platform, you see this podcast being posted, you can interact with her on LinkedIn or other social media as well. And so again, her website will give you information as how to contact her. So thanks again for listening. And here's the announcer.
We've come to the end of another exciting show, and if you enjoyed this podcast, 1. Make sure you give this show a rating and review. 2. Subscribe to the show to get all new releases. And 3. Get your complimentary copy of the 5 Secrets to a Happier Marriage ebook at kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. Again, it's kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. See the link in the show notes. Do it today. Don't delay. Thanks so much for listening, and make sure you tell one other spouse about this show, or better yet, share it with them. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May he turn his face toward you and give you his peace, both now and forever.